Welcome to our YouTube channel, The Alien Tales, and please ensure that you have subscribed.
They sent me to study her species, but I couldn't stop falling in love. I was supposed to observe, record, and report. I never meant to memorize the way her eyes glowed when she smiled. Day 47 of the Kepler 442b expedition. Dr. Marcus Chen typed the date into his field journal with mechanical precision, the same way he'd done for the past 6 weeks. The Xenological Survey Division expected daily reports, detailed, objective analyses of the indigenous population they discovered on this distant world. What they were getting instead were increasingly personal observations about one particular individual. He deleted the line and started again. Subject 7 Alpha continues to display remarkable adaptability in social interactions with research team members. Marcus paused, stylus hovering over the holographic interface. That wasn't right either. Her name was Lyra, not Subject 7 Alpha. She told him that on the third day, when she'd approached their camp with nothing but curiosity and a handful of luminescent fruits as an offering. The problem was, the moment he started thinking of her as Lyra instead of a research subject, everything else began to unravel. Marcus stood from his workstation and moved to the observation deck of their temporary base. Through the transparent aluminum dome, he could see the twin moons rising over the crystalline forests of Kepler 442b. Somewhere out there, Lyra was sleeping in her tree home, her silver hair probably catching the moonlight like spun starfire. He was in trouble. It had started as the perfect assignment. After 8 years of studying extinct civilizations and fossilized remains, Marcus finally had the chance to observe a living, breathing alien culture. The humanoid species on Kepler 442b had achieved a sustainable civilization without ever developing technology beyond what Earth's Bronze Age might have produced. If the Bronze Age had involved beings who could communicate through bioluminescent displays and manipulate plant growth with their touch, the Aetheri, as they called themselves, were a study in contradictions. They possessed abilities that defied current scientific understanding, yet lived in harmony with their environment in ways that made Earth's environmentalists weep with envy. They had no written language, yet seemed to possess a collective memory that spanned millennia. And they were absolutely, devastatingly beautiful, especially Lyra. She was the first of her people to approach the human research team, drawn by what she later described as curious light patterns emanating from their equipment. Where other Aetheri observed from a distance, Lyra had walked right up to their perimeter sensors and placed her hands on them, causing the devices to illuminate in ways their manufacturers had definitely not intended. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, the team's lead xenobiologist, had been thrilled. Electromagnetic manipulation, she'd whispered to Marcus. They interact with technology on a quantum level we don't even understand. But Marcus hadn't been thinking about quantum mechanics when Lyra first looked at him. He'd been thinking about how her eyes shifted from deep purple to silver when she was amused, and how her smile seemed to make the air itself shimmer. Professional objectivity, he'd learned, was easier in theory than in practice. "You're documenting mating rituals today," Dr. Hendricks announced during the morning briefing, causing Marcus to choke on his synth coffee. "I'm sorry, what?" "The Aetheri." She pulled up a holographic display showing several of Lyra's people engaged in what looked like an elaborate dance, their bodies glowing in synchronized patterns. "They've invited us to observe what appears to be a courtship ceremony. Your anthropological background makes you the obvious choice." Marcus felt his stomach perform an uncomfortable gymnastics routine. "Dr. Hendricks, I think maybe Dr. Vega would be better suited. Vega's busy with the botanical samples. Besides, you've established the best rapport with the subjects." She gave him a look that suggested she knew exactly why that was. Particularly Subject 7 Alpha. "Her name is Lyra." The words came out sharper than he'd intended. Dr. Hendricks raised an eyebrow. "Of course, Lyra." She emphasized the name slightly. "She specifically requested you be present. Apparently, she wants to explain the significance of the ceremony to you personally." Marcus's mouth went dry. "She requested me specifically?" "That's what the translation algorithms indicated. Though you know how imprecise they still are with Aetheri emotional nuances." Dr. Hendricks gathered her data pads. "Try to remain objective, Dr. Chen. I know it's challenging when studying such an aesthetically pleasing species." The ceremony took place in a grove of trees that Marcus had never seen before, trees that seemed to grow as he watched, their bark shifting and swirling in patterns that matched the movements of the Aetheri dancers. Lyra met him at the edge of the clearing, wearing what appeared to be living vines woven with flowers that glowed like tiny stars. "Marcus, friend," she said, and his heart did that annoying flutter thing it had been doing whenever she used the suffix she'd created for him. In Aetheri culture, adding "friend" to someone's name indicated a bond that transcended casual acquaintance. She was the only one of her people who used it with any human. "Lyra," he replied, pleased that his voice remained steady. "Thank you for inviting me to observe." She tilted her head, a gesture that was both utterly human and completely alien when combined with the way her hair moved like it was underwater. "Not observe. Participate, understand." Participate. Marcus felt his professional composure slipping. "Lyra, I can't. I'm not Aetheri. I wouldn't know how." Her eyes shifted to that silver-mused color. Body glow not necessary for heart understanding. Before he could protest further, she took his hand. Her skin was warm, with a texture like the finest silk, and where she touched him, Marcus could swear he felt a gentle electrical current. Not painful, energizing like being plugged into the universe itself. "Come," she said, and led him into the grove. The ceremony was unlike anything in Marcus's xenocultural database. The Aetheri moved in pairs, their bioluminescent displays creating patterns that seemed to tell stories. One couple glowed in alternating waves of blue and gold, their lights pursuing each other in spirals around their bodies. Another pair created what looked like constellations, points of light appearing and disappearing across their skin in response to their partner's display. "Each pairing tells a story," Lyra explained, her voice soft beside him. They stood at the edge of the gathering, watching the dance unfold. "Stories of how hearts find hearts." "It's beautiful," Marcus said, and meant it. He was so focused on taking mental notes that he almost missed Lyra's next words. "Would you like to know our story?" Marcus turned to stare at her. "Our story." Lyra's eyes had gone deep purple. What he'd learned was her serious color. "The lights I would make for you, if I could make lights for you." The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a meteor strike. Among the Aetheri, the bioluminescent displays were as personal as fingerprints, as intimate as a name. No two patterns were alike, and they were only shared between bonded pairs. "Lyra, I know you cannot glow," she said quickly. "I know your people are different, but I see the light in you, even without bioluminescence. It shines from your eyes when you look at stars. When you look at me." Marcus felt like the ground was tilting beneath his feet. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was a scientist, a trained observer. He had protocols to follow, reports to file, a career that depended on maintaining professional distance. "Show me," he heard himself say. Lyra's smile was radiant enough to power their base for a week. She stepped closer, raising her hands to hover just above his shoulders. "Close your eyes." Marcus closed his eyes, aware of the warmth radiating from her skin, the subtle scent of the flowers in her hair, something like jasmine mixed with ozone. He felt rather than saw the light beginning to flow across her body. "Open." He opened his eyes to find himself standing in the center of a living aurora. Lyra's skin glowed with patterns that defied description. Swirls of violet and gold that seemed to reach toward him, points of silver light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The display was so complex, so beautiful, that it took him several moments to realize what he was seeing. It was a map of the night sky. Not just any night sky. The view from Earth, the constellations he'd grown up watching from his grandmother's farm. But woven throughout the familiar patterns were new stars, new connections, creating something that was both his sky and entirely other. "How did you?" His voice came out rough. "You speak of your home sky often," Lyra said, her glow shifting to include spirals of blue. "I listen. I remember. I create new patterns from your heart sky and mine." Marcus stared at her. This impossible, beautiful being who had somehow reached into his memories and painted them in light across her skin. The rational part of his mind was cataloging every detail for his report. The rest of him was falling and falling hard. "I can't glow for you," he said quietly. "You glow in other ways." Lyra stepped closer, close enough that the edge of her light displays flickered across his clothes. Your words when you speak of science. Your laugh when I say something unexpected. Your eyes when you think I am not watching. She was right about that last part. Marcus had been doing a lot of watching when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Memorizing the way she moved, the sound of her voice, the 100 small things that made her uniquely herself. The others will think I'm compromised, he said. Are you? Marcus considered lying, maintaining the pretense of scientific objectivity for just a little longer. Instead, he reached up and touched her cheek, marveling at how her skin seemed to pulse with gentle warmth. Completely. Dr. Hendricks took the news better than Marcus had expected. I had wondered when this would happen, she said, not looking up from her data analysis. Xenological survey teams have a 37% rate of cross-species emotional attachment. It's actually lower than I anticipated for this mission. 37%? Marcus felt simultaneously relieved and slightly insulted. This has happened before? Dr. Chen, in my 20 years of studying alien cultures, I've learned that intelligence recognizes intelligence, and beauty recognizes beauty, regardless of species. The universe has a sense of humor about these things. She finally looked up at him. The question is, what do you plan to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? Marcus had been agonizing over it for the past 2 weeks, ever since the ceremony. He and Lyra had been spending more time together, ostensibly so he could document Aetheri cultural practices. In reality, they'd been teaching each other their languages, sharing stories, and learning that connection didn't require the same biology. I don't know if there's anything I can do, Marcus admitted. The mission ends in 6 weeks. I have to return to Earth. Do you? Marcus stared at her. Dr. Hendricks, I can't just stay here. My career, my life. Your life is wherever you make it meaningful. She turned back to her work. But that's a conversation for you and Lyra to have, not me. Just remember we're explorers, Dr. Chen. Sometimes we discover more than we set out to find. That evening, Marcus found Lyra in her favorite spot overlooking the crystal lake. She was sitting on a fallen log, her feet dangling in the water, creating ripples that caught the light from the 3 moons. She didn't need to glow here. The ambient luminescence of the lake was enough to make her skin shimmer like starlight. You're troubled, she said without turning around. Your biorhythm is agitated. Marcus had learned that the Aetheri could sense emotional states the way humans could see colors. It made lying impossible, which he found both terrifying and liberating. The team returns to our world soon, he said, settling beside her on the log. I know. Her voice was soft. Will you miss this place? Yes. Marcus watched the way the moonlight played across the water. But not as much as I'll miss you. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her words were measured, careful. In my culture, there is a word, switchhai. It means to bind one's light to another's, even across impossible distances. Marcus felt his heart skip. Lyra, I know your people don't bind in the same way. She turned to look at him, her eyes that deep purple of serious conversation. But I wonder if maybe light finds light regardless of distance. What are you saying? She stood, extending her hand to him. Come. I want to show you something. Lyra led him through the forest to a grove he'd never seen before, where massive crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen trees. She approached the largest crystal, placing her hands on its surface. Immediately, it began to glow, pulsing with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. Communication crystals, she explained. My people use them to speak across great distances. The light carries our thoughts, our emotions, our very essence. Marcus watched in amazement as other crystals throughout the grove began to resonate, creating a symphony of light and sound. How is that possible? Quantum entanglement, I think your people would call it. Lyra's smile was slightly smug. We may not have your technology, but we understand the universe in our own ways. She pressed her hands more firmly against the crystal, and suddenly Marcus could feel something. A presence warm and familiar, like someone calling his name. The sensation faded as she stepped back. Distance does not break the bond, she said simply. Light remembers light. Marcus stared at her, understanding flooding through him. You're saying we could stay in contact, even with me back on Earth. I am saying that if you must go, you do not go alone. Lyra moved closer, taking his hands in hers. I am saying that love is the greatest discovery, and perhaps worth studying further. The board will never approve an extended mission based on personal feelings, Marcus said. Even as hope began to flutter in his chest. Then maybe it is time to stop asking permission for what matters most. Dr. Hendricks found them 3 hours later, sitting by the crystal grove and talking in urgent whispers. She took one look at Marcus's expression and sighed. You're staying, aren't you? 6 more months, Marcus said quickly. I've documented less than 20% of their cultural practices. The board would be throwing away an unprecedented opportunity if they pulled me out now. And Dr. Chen's personal feelings have nothing to do with this assessment? Dr. Hendricks asked dryly. Absolutely not, Marcus replied, then caught sight of Lyra's silver-amused eyes and smiled. Okay, maybe 5% personal feelings. Aha! Dr. Hendricks looked between them, then shook her head with apparent exasperation. You know what? Fine. I'll recommend the extension. But Chen, if you want to make this work long-term, you need to be thinking beyond just staying here. What do you mean? I mean that love is a bridge, but cooperation builds roads. She gestured toward the crystal grove. The Aetheri have technology we don't understand, and we have knowledge they could use. Maybe it's time we stopped thinking of this as simple observation and started thinking of it as partnership. Marcus felt something click into place. A cultural exchange program. Exactly. Bring some of them to Earth, leave some of us here. Create permanent research stations on both worlds. Dr. Hendricks's eyes gleamed with the light of scientific possibility. Of course, we'd need someone to head up the Kepler 442b side of things. Someone who understands both cultures. Marcus looked at Lyra, who was following the conversation with an expression of growing excitement. You'd really recommend that? Dr. Chen, I've been watching you for months. You're not the same person who arrived here. You're seeing things not just as a scientist, but as someone who cares about the people behind the data. That's exactly the kind of perspective we need for a project like this. The proposal took 8 months to work its way through the various boards, committees, and bureaucratic channels of both Earth's government and the Xenological Survey Division. During that time, Marcus lived in a strange suspension between worlds, officially extended on Kepler 442b for research purposes, but spending most of his time building something that felt remarkably like a life. He learned to read the subtle changes in Lyra's bioluminescent patterns, discovering that she had a particular glow she only showed when she found something genuinely funny, and another when she was deep in thought. He taught her Earth languages, delighting in her pronunciation of words like precipitation and bureaucracy. They developed a comfortable routine of shared meals, conversation, and long walks through forests that seemed to grow more beautiful the more he understood them. And at night, when the research base was quiet and the twin moons were high, they would lie together in the crystal grove and send patterns of light across the galaxy to the crystals Marcus had arranged in his Earth laboratory, maintaining a connection that spanned impossible distances. The day the approval finally came through, Marcus was teaching Lyra to play chess using pieces she'd grown from modified seedlings. The communication crystal beside them chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Hendricks, and Marcus felt his stomach tighten with anticipation. Unanimous approval from all parties. Dr. Hendricks's voice carried clearly through space and time. Dr. Chen, congratulations. You're now the head of the first permanent interspecies cultural research station. And Lyra, if you're listening, the Earth delegation would be honored to have you represent your people in our cultural exchange program. Marcus looked at Lyra, whose entire body had begun to glow with excitement. What do you think? Ready to see Earth? I think, Lyra said, her patterns shifting to include spirals of gold and silver that reached toward him like tiny arms. That home is where the heart finds resonance. And my heart resonates with yours, whether on your world or mine. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the new research station, watching the sunrise paint the crystal forests in shades of amber and rose. The facility was a marvel of combined technologies. Human engineering merged with Aetheri organic cultivation, creating buildings that grew rather than being built, that adapted to their environment rather than dominating it. Lyra emerged from their shared quarters, her hair still mussed from sleep, wearing one of his old earth sweaters over her traditional clothing. The sight never failed to make him smile. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, pulling her close. "Good morning, my heart light," she replied, settling against his side with the comfortable ease of long familiarity. Through the observation window, they could see the first shuttle of the day arriving from Earth, carrying supplies, personnel, and a group of Aetheri returning from their stint on the human homeworld. The cultural exchange program had exceeded everyone's expectations, fostering advances in everything from agricultural techniques to quantum communications. "Regent Council meeting this afternoon," Marcus reminded her. "The Earth delegation wants to discuss expanding the crystal communication network to other systems." "And tonight?" Lyra asked, her eyes shifting to their silver-amused color. "Tonight, we celebrate our 2-year anniversary by scandalizing Dr. Hendricks with our existence." Lyra laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. She pretends to disapprove, but her biorhythm shows pleasure when she sees us together. She's just jealous that we figured out how to make an interspecies relationship work when she can barely manage to date within her own species. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their strange new world wake up. Human staff members emerged from their quarters, greeting Aetheri colleagues with respectful bows that had become the standard interspecies greeting. Children, both human and Aetheri, ran through the communal gardens, playing games that probably would have horrified xenopsychologists with their cultural mixing. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyra asked quietly. "Staying here? Choosing this instead of the life you had planned?" Marcus considered the question, as he had many times over the past 2 years. He thought about the career he'd left behind, the conferences he'd missed, the papers he might have published. Then he looked at Lyra, whose presence in his life had turned his carefully planned trajectory into something he never could have imagined. "Never," he said firmly. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Even when I accidentally grow carnivorous plants in our bedroom, especially then." Marcus grinned. "Though maybe we could establish some ground rules about the flora decor." Lyra's response was lost as the first chime of the day echoed through the station, the Aetheri method of marking time, which the humans had adopted because it was far more pleasant than the harsh electronic beeps of Earth technology. Around them, their hybrid community came to life, a small but growing bridge between two worlds that were learning they had more in common than anyone had dared to hope. Marcus thought about his original mission directive: observe, record, and report. He'd done all of that, but somewhere along the way, the most important discoveries had happened not in his field notes, but in the spaces between words, in the moments when science gave way to connection. He'd been sent to study her species. Instead, he'd learned that love was the greatest discovery of all, and the one phenomenon that remained beautifully, mysteriously, universally constant, no matter how many light years separated the hearts that found each other across the darkness of space. As the twin suns climbed higher in the alien sky, Marcus, Chen, and Lyra walked hand in hand into their impossible, wonderful life, carrying the light of two worlds between them and proving that some bonds truly were stronger than gravity, distance, or the vast indifference of the universe itself. In his final official report to the Xenological Survey Division, Marcus wrote, "Love appears to be the most adaptable and resilient force in the galaxy. Recommend immediate and extensive further study." Dr. Hendricks approved the research proposal without revision. Epilogue. 5 years after first contact. The wedding took place in the Crystal Grove where they'd first shared the possibility of forever. Human customs mixed with Aetheri traditions in a ceremony that would have been impossible to imagine before their worlds found each other. Lyra glowed with patterns that included the constellations of both their home skies, while Marcus wore a suit embedded with living fibers that pulsed with gentle light in response to her biorhythms. Dr. Hendricks officiated, having been ordained through the newly established Interspecies Spiritual Council. "Do you, Marcus, take Lyra to be your heart resonance, in light and in darkness, across all worlds and all times?" "I do," Marcus said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "Do you, Lyra, take Marcus to be your spirit bond, in growth and in stillness, across all distances and all seasons?" "I do," Lyra replied, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystals around them sing. "Then by the authority vested in me by two worlds, I pronounce you bound in love, unified in purpose, and brilliantly, beautifully impossible. As they kissed, Lyra's joy blazed across her skin in patterns of gold and silver, while the crystal grove resonated with light that could be seen from orbit. A beacon announcing to both their worlds that love had found a way, as it always did, as it always would. They sent him to study her species. Instead, he'd learned that some things are worth staying for. Some connections transcend the boundaries of worlds, and the universe's greatest discovery is always, always love.